lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, two-spirited or more, LGBTQIA2S+, or trans and queer for short. These Stonewall protests, led by the Inn's poor trans, Black, and Latino patrons, joined by homeless youth living in the adjacent park, fought for the right to live and gather safely, openly, and authentically, and became a seismic moment in U.S. history. And whereas the next year's commemoration of Stonewall in 1970 became the first Pride March observed by community members in several cities, including Seattle, and has since become the worldwide recognition, celebration, and political event for trans and queer communities it is today. And I'll pass it off to Coral.
Hi, I'm Coral. My pronouns are it and its and they, them. I'm an airport volunteer specialist here at the port in aviation customer service. Whereas our community's fight for dignity, respect, equality, inclusion, and belonging continues in our streets, courts, and legislative chambers to keep pushing back against discrimination, police violence, and bigoted laws. Whereas, despite significant progress in our human rights since Stonewall, 2025 has brought a growing number of laws and proposed legislation rooted in bigotry and homophobia, aiming to deny American freedoms of expression and speech protected by the Constitution, crucial gender-affirming care, medical care, and other life-saving forms of education and legal protections. Right now, the American Civil Liberties Union is tracking 575 such bills across the country, 4 right here in Washington state. And whereas anti-blackness, racism, ableism, misogyny, colorism, xenophobia, and immigration status all interconnect with transphobia and homophobia to capture every vulnerable community in a net of prejudice, discrimination, invisibility, marginalization, and physical and social attacks. Combined, these forces work tirelessly to unjustly strip away protections for fundamental rights and dignity in spaces like hospitals, schools, places of employment, housing, and public accommodations. And I'll hand it off to Nick.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Gabriel, Port Construction Construction Program Leader, Construction Services. My pronouns are he, him. Whereas the many ways trans queer people form families and what they look like continue to be an arena in this fight for equal rights. And whereas UCLA Law's Williams Institute indicates people of color make up 40% of trans and queer adults. They also note that of 1.3 million immigrant adults identifying as such, 23% lack adequate documentation. This intersectionality of multiple identities compounds the lived experiences of trans and queer immigrants, particularly those of color. Such experiences often spur their immigration, fleeing their home countries to avoid persecution, threats of state-sponsored attack, and other forms of violence, including sexual assault. And whereas the Port of Seattle celebrates the values of its trans and queer employees, business partners, and community members year-round and during Pride Month, in part through support of its port-wide Pride and transgender inclusivity employee groups. The Port learns from and lifts up their leadership as they work to keep the Port an employer that recognizes the importance of attracting and retaining an expert workforce through healthcare equity, gender-affirming care, family formation, and benefits responsive to the needs of all employees. And I hand it off to Lex.
My name is Lex Capistani. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a civil engineering intern with the Port this summer. Whereas, because Pride Month is a time to learn, reflect on, and honor the trials and contributions of these community members in their fight for human rights, it is an opportunity for the Port of Seattle to commit to solidarity and allyship to eradicate discrimination and injustices for collective liberation. And whereas the Port of Seattle stands strong against discrimination, threats, and deadly violence against trans and queer communities, families, and individuals in accordance with Port values and its belief in equality, liberty, and justice for all. Now, therefore, the Port of Seattle Commission hereby proclaims June 2025 Pride Month.
Thank you all for that presentation and that reading. At this time, I will open up the floor for my colleagues to make their comments. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
I love the month of June precisely because it is Pride Month, and it's going to sound trite, I think, often when we talk about this stuff, but in part because I think ultimately it is about love. And for those who maybe hear this proclamation and bristle a little bit because of their own personal history and upbringing, I would just ask you to really internalize what is it that you are afraid of about a community receiving due rights, because rights are not zero-sum. Love is not zero-sum. When we respect the rights of everyone, regardless of whom they love, we actually increase for everyone the love that exists. And as I think about my own experience with people in the LGBTQIA2S+ community and what people have told them they should fear about coming out or about living into the gender that they know they are universally 100% better off when they are able to access the same rights that everyone else has. And so in my lifetime, in 48 years, we have made enormous strides. And 2025 is a year in which we need to hold the line as big, powerful forces want to move backward. And that's why it's incumbent upon an institution like the Port of Seattle to say this clearly and publicly, and for each and every one of us that has a little bit of a soapbox to make clear where we stand on this, and also to quietly in our own spaces let those know who feel persecuted that we stand with them and we love them. And I'm thinking right now about loved ones who can share their own stories, but for whom I am a key ally, and I will always love them and stand up for them and try to make sure that they are safe too.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellman.
Thank you, and thank you for that great reading. In reflecting on Commissioner Calkins' thoughtful statement, reminds me of the Beatles song, that the love you take is equal to the love you make, and it's very appropriate. I thank you for that that feeling. But as far as the port goes, I think it's just fundamental that we look at discrimination, we look at these things as universally things that we oppose, and equality being something that we completely support. So, thank you for elevating this for us to be able to affirm our beliefs on, but it's completely consistent with everything that we stand for, and I greatly appreciate you being part of this ability for us to affirm that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Yeah, I also want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. First and foremost, I want to thank our port employees, you all who have come before us this morning to read the proclamation, but also everyone within the port family and within the ERG that continues to not just advocate for the communities, but also help create a culture at this institution that is welcoming for everyone. And when we talk about being a welcoming port, a welcoming organization, we're not really just talking about those who travel through our airports or seaports. We're really also talking about those who work here and call themselves a member of the port ecosystem. And so I really do appreciate all that you all do to create that culture of belonging and acceptance. As a commission, and in particular during this administration, we're fighting tooth and nail to preserve the rights of those who are being attacked by this administration. It feels like every week we go into executive session and we're being briefed about something that this administration is doing that is trying to attack people who identify as anything but male or female. And so I hope you all understand and know that we as a body are doing everything that we possibly can within our legal authority to preserve those rights, to preserve what we believe to be, what makes us so special here in this region, but also as an organization. And I just want to affirm all the things that my colleagues have said with regards to this community and to the level to which they belong and are accepted here. So thank you all, and happy Pride Month.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohammed.
Thank you. I also echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and Commissioner Calkins, your words was very touching. Thank you to everyone who brought this proclamation forward today. I really appreciated how the proclamation actually centered alignment across movements and underscores the importance of defending civil rights. I think now more than ever we need to be reminded of that, and just really appreciate how that was included in the proclamation. It reminds us that no matter who you love, how you pray, and where you come from, everyone deserves dignity, respect, and the right to live freely and the right to live safely. As a commission, you've heard from my colleagues, but we stand firm in our commitment to justice, dignity, and equal opportunities for all, and we will always fight for that as a commission. And to me, it's no coincidence that Pride Month, Juneteenth, Immigrant Heritage Month all fall in the month of June. Each of those moments carry a lot of history, a shared struggle, resistance, and resilience. Our communities are so resilient, and we share that, and together we will continue to stand up for the rights of people, and will continue to hold the line for our intersectionalities as well, and what connects us. And so to the Pride GRE staff, our partners, our neighbors, thank you. We see you, we celebrate you, and we will continue to fight alongside you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed. June is a season of pride where we honor the ongoing struggle for freedom and dignity for all people in our LGBTQIA2S+ communities. Pride began with a protest led by Marsha Johnson and other leaders. But Marsha was a Black trans woman who stood up against brutality at Stonewall. And as Commissioner Mohammed also mentioned, June coincides with Juneteenth as well, which is the anniversary of delayed justice for Black Americans. So today, we acknowledge that justice lives at the intersection of every identity to make sure that no one is left behind in our country's promise for equal treatment, equal access, and equal protections under the law. In a time where we are seeing nationwide and emboldened attacks on our community members, including our LGBTQIA2S communities, WIMBY programs, equity, diversity, inclusion, immigrants, and refugees, we recommit ourselves to our raised values, not only to our own Port of Seattle personnel, but we extend it to everyone who works and operates at our facilities and our broader community. This is what we recommit to today. And for those of you who are watching today to wonder what your commission will say on this issue and where we stand exactly, we love you. We stand with you. We honor you. And behind the scenes and out front, we will continue to fight with and for you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your beauty. Thank you for your fearlessness and your authenticity and persevering. I'd also like to thank Director Kesar, Jim, Nick, Coral, and Lex for your reading and your contributions to this piece. Happy Pride to everybody. With that, Commissioners, I'll look to you for a motion and a second to adopt this proclamation.
So moved?
Second.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Mohammed and seconded by Commissioner Calkins. Clerk Hart, please call the roll for this item.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you, and Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes and 0 nays for this item.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the Executive Director's report. Executive Director Metrick, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'd like to begin by wishing everyone a happy Pride Month and extending my heartfelt thanks to our Port-wide Pride Employee Resource Group for their powerful reading of the Pride Month proclamation and your very heartfelt comments. I also want to acknowledge that last week, the Port's chapter of Blacks in Government celebrated Juneteenth with a luncheon that included inspirational performances and the awarding of scholarships to impressive young people heading to college. Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed, for your participation in that great event. These celebrations are an important part of our inclusion efforts, and they affirm the dignity, diversity, and humanity of all people. I want to thank Deputy Executive Karen Goon for filling in for me earlier this month when I was on travel. When I was travel away on port business and PTO for a couple of weeks. I appreciate her doing that. And I wanted to mention that following these remarks, I'll be calling on her once again because I will be headed to south to the Port's Electrification Conference in California, where I'll be speaking on a panel with Don Lindell from City Light on our partnership, and I'll also be visiting the Port of Long Beach and tour some of the innovative electric charging facilities there. And I believe Commissioner Cho and Commissioner Ang from the Port of Tacoma will be joining us there as well. So before handing over the reins to the capable hands of Deputy Executive Director Goon for the rest of the meeting, I have a few brief updates. Earlier this month, I had the opportunity to stop by our unified command that we established for the FIFA Club World Cup to see the excellent partnership taking place between FIFA and our operations staff as our team coordinates team VIP and staff movements throughout our airport. And the fact that you haven't heard too much about it is because it's been working very smoothly in order to do that. And I want to call out Julie Collins and her staff for doing this important work. And I'm happy to report the operations have been very smooth for the games that began June 17th and conclude June 25th. Our team, I don't want to comment on how the Sounders are doing, though, in that effort. I'll leave that off. Our teams managed these operations during this time period beautifully during a very busy period for the port. The beginning of the summer traveling season is kicking in, school is out, and that is noticeable. In fact, this Sunday, we hit an all-time high for processing people through SEA. 75,429 travelers being screened through our airport through TSA. So there we were at a record already on a non-holiday weekend in order to do that. And despite the high volume, teams were able to support efficient movements for passengers and for our FIFA guests through SEA. So I want to thank all the teams that contributed to a successful Club Cup, and we're ready for 2026 and when the World Cup and the world comes to Seattle. Switching gears, I want to comment that while we are always ready and eager to welcome the world to Seattle, we cannot ignore world events and the escalated crisis in the Middle East, the evolving federal policies, and how those changes impact our employees, our community, and those traveling to and from the United States. I shared with our employees this morning a personal note acknowledging the challenges that some of them may be going through both personally and professionally at this time. While there are no known specific threats against any Port of Seattle interests, this is a time to remain vigilant about cybersecurity as well as physical security throughout all of our facilities. Our Port of Seattle Police Department and our airport security team and all of our airport team and seaport teams continually are working to evaluate, monitor, and prepare to protect and ensure safe passage through our maritime and aviation gateways. I personally encourage all of us to be aware of and considerate to colleagues and others experiencing personal effects and stress during these times of crisis. I know that many of you have friends and loved ones in harm's way. We pray for their safety and for peace throughout the world. So moving to today's commission meeting, I'd like to highlight a few items. On our consent agenda, we have a request related to replace PC air handling units. Once authorized, this project will replace or refurbish units at 16 gates across the port. You will also consider an update to our diversity and contracting goals through 2030, and you will also hear staff briefings on the Snow Valley Responsible Tourism Project and a recap of the 2025 state legislative session. Commissioners, with this concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Metrick. We're now at committee reports, and here to introduce it would be Strategic Advisor to the Commission, Francis Cho.
Thank you very much, Commission President. Commissioners, Executive Director Metrick, my name is Francis Cho, Commission Strategic Advisor. I will be providing the committee report starting with the Highline Forum. On May 28th, the Highline Forum met with Tukwila Councilmember Papine chairing and Port of Seattle Commissioner Cho in attendance. The meeting started with the host city of Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling sharing their efforts to positively grow the city's economy and spoke of the need for balanced growth that provides opportunities for all. The forum then received 3 major updates on the 2024 START annual report by START facilitator Andres Mattia, Port Community Engagement Manager Marco Melanese, Port Federal Government Relations Manager Eric Shinfield, followed by an update on START's first state legislative priorities advocacy efforts in Olympia by Port State Government Relations Manager John Flanagan, and an update on the Port's Economic Development Partnership City Grant Program and an update on the Port's Economic Development Partnership and an update on the Port's Economic Development Partnership City Grant Program by Port Economic Development Manager Annie Tran. And the meeting concluded with round-the-table sharing where Port External Relations Capital Delivery Director Claire Gallagher noted the Port Commission's approval on May 27th of workforce development funding authorization and authorization for additional design funding for the S Concourse Evolution Project. On June 18th, Commissioners Cho and Calkins convened the Sustainability, Environment, and Climate Committee, where they were briefed on the Fisherman's Terminal Entrance Paving and Downey Building Demolition Project under the Sustainable Evolution Framework. Commissioners were very complimentary of the staff's thoughtful analysis and approved the proposed recommendations. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Francis. And we are going to continue in our agenda to the public comment portion of our meeting. The Port Commission welcomes public comment as an important part of the public process. Comments are received and considered by the Commission in its deliberations. Now, before we take public comment, let's review our rules for in-person and virtual comment, and Clerk Hart has a nifty video to play for us.
The Port of Seattle Commission welcomes you to our meeting today. As noted, public comment is an important part of the public process, and the Port of Seattle Commission thanks you for joining us. Before proceeding, we will overview the rules governing public comment for your general information. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak unless otherwise revised by the presiding officer for the purposes of meeting efficiency, and the speaker shall keep their remarks within the allotted time provided. A timer will appear on the screen, and a buzzer will sound at the end of the speaker's comment period. The Commission accepts comments on items appearing on its agenda and items related to the conduct of port business. The presiding officer will ask speakers to limit their comments to these topics. This rule applies to both introductory and concluding remarks. Disruptions of Commission public meetings are prohibited. General disruptions include, but are not limited to, the following: speaking before being recognized by the presiding officer, holding or placing banners and signs in the meeting room in a way that endangers others or obstructs the flow of people or view of others at the meeting. Intentionally disrupting, disturbing, or otherwise impeding attendance or participation at a meeting. Refusing to follow the direction of the presiding officer or security personnel. Attempting to use the comment time for purposeful delay without conveying a discernible message. Using the comment period to assist in a campaign for election of any person to any office or for the promotion of or opposition to any ballot proposition except when addressing action being taken by the Commission on a ballot proposition appearing on its agenda. Directing public comments to the audience. Engaging in abusive or harassing behavior, including but not limited to derogatory remarks based on age, race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, disability, pregnancy, sex, gender, sexual orientation, transgender status, marital status, or any other category protected by law, the use of obscene or profane language and gestures, assaults or other threatening behavior, and sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. For safety purposes, individuals are asked not to physically approach commissioners or staff at the meeting table during the meeting. Individuals may provide written public comment before or after the meeting, and in addition, speakers may offer written materials to the Commission clerk for distribution during their testimony to the Commission. A detailed list of the public comment rules is available through the Commission clerk. If a meeting is disrupted by an individual in attendance in the meeting room or by an individual providing public comment in person or virtually, the port will impose progressive consequences that may result in exclusion from future meetings. Written materials provided to the clerk will be included in today's meeting record. The clerk has a list of those prepared to speak. When your name is called, please come to the testimony table or unmute yourself if joining virtually. Repeat your name for the record and state your topic related to an item on the agenda or related to the conduct of port business. For those joining virtually, when you have concluded your remarks, please turn off your camera and mute your microphone. Our public comment period will now commence. Thank you again for joining us today.
Okay, Clerk Hart, I'm gonna let you go ahead and guide us through the public comment portion, beginning with those who are in person, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner President. One moment, let me get the timer up. And beginning in person in the room, we'll start with Glenn Stockwell. Mr. Stockwell, please come to the testimony table. Restate your name for the record and your agenda item that you're discussing today or your topic related to the conduct of port business, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Glenn Stockwell. I'm from Richville, Washington. And I'm here to talk to you about economic development that the presenter had spoken about. You have an opportunity to help. I've known Patty Murray for many years. She's just slightly younger than I am. And she's been wanting to put the canal project in since 1993. It's part of her agenda. And I think that she would need the help of the Port District and all of your staff to help with that issue. And I'm here today to ask you if you'd consider sending a letter to Patty Murray and to the other congressional senators and representatives of Washington State, offering your assistance in bringing this project to Washington State. I'm the person that took it to Gary Locke, Tom Foley, Christine Gregoire, and Jay Inslee. And what's uniquely different now, they never could get the money for the project, but there's over $5 billion sitting on the federal table that was approved in 2021. And you could take your services and help them acquire that money and put it into a trust account to build the project. And I'm talking about a canal project. And I have a letter here for Ms. Hasagawa. I crossed out what you had mentioned and everything there. It should be legal. And so I put in large projects. I'm the person that was awarded the 1990 solid waste project with Waste Management, and for 30-some years, they've been giving you a service for your solid waste. It takes years to put these in, and with your help, we could do it much faster, and with the help of Tacoma also. So I hope that you will issue that letter to them. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time and your public comment, Glenn.
Madam Commission President, members of the commission, our next speaker from the room is Barbara McMichael. Welcome, Barbara. Please
Welcome.
go ahead and repeat your name for the record and your agenda item or topic related to the conduct of port business, and then I'll start the timer.
Hello, everybody. Barbara McMichael, founding member of, one of the founding members of Defenders of Highline Forest and a Des Moines resident. I'll be talking about public works in a general way. First, I'm going to debut my fabulous hairdo. It's a little patchy. It comes at great expense. I had a cancer diagnosis last year, and so this is after 4.5 months of chemo. And one of the bright spots about sitting for 5.5 hours in a chair every couple of weeks to get your chemo treatment is you get to read great books. This one I would recommend to all of you. You're all idealistic, and yet working within the parameters that you have to work within. You'll find this inspiring. It's called What If We Get It Right? It's compiled by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, which Commissioner Feldman may recognize as a preeminent marine biologist. And she had a couple of comments that I wrote down in my little notebook because they were so inspiring to me as I work to try to, when we're talking about commitment to stewarding natural resources and so on, I'm always about save the trees, save the trees. Love the 4-to-1 replacement plan, but it's even better to save the original trees if we can. So 2 comments from Regine Clement, who I won't get into her bio, but these are things that were included in this book. One of the things she said was, we are a society overly driven by capital and wealth, and we need to work on bringing new moral norms to capitalism. And you have a very efficient, very professional staff. They get things done. I think it is our job as the public to tell you, as our electeds, that we really desire, we're seeing climate change all over in catastrophic ways. We really need, you are, of all people, of all electeds, you are our hope. So I'm seeing 19 minutes. So I just really want you to, or seconds, I really want you to think about this in every decision you make. The SAMP is really catastrophic to those of us who live near the airport. And so please include that in your consideration. My time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes my sign-up list from the room. I can go virtually.
Let's go with those who signed up in advance virtually.
Thank you. So our next speaker virtually is David Goebel. David, please go ahead and repeat your name for the record and your agenda item or topic related to the conduct of port business, please, and then I'll start the timer.
Okay. My name is David Goebel. I'm the president of Vashon Island Fair Skies, a 501c3 founded in the wake of FAA's Next Gen implementation over Vashon Island. Tonight, I'm going to continue some comments on the specifically addressing some of the responses made by staff to some of the questions that commissioners asked about the START process at the last meeting a month ago. So thanks for asking really great questions. I really appreciate that. One of the things that, not necessarily, some stuff just wasn't the whole truth. Just wanted to try to add some additional context to some of the questions provided by staff. One of the issues is the problem with the Zoom format and the switch from normal Zoom format into webinars panelist mode. It's not a technical problem. There was no technical problem. It was an intentional change done to change from a situation where everybody can see who's in the meeting. Only people who are actual official members could speak, but you could actually see who was there. And it's very similar to actually the way that the Port Commission meetings are run, which is run really well on using Teams. I think it's doing hybrid is tough, but you guys do a really good job on that. And potentially even the port could save money if I assume you have a site license for Teams, so you start use that method and follow the customs that you do at the Port Commission meetings would be a substantial improvement in terms of community participation. I also wanted to address Commissioner Fellman talked about the Part 150 process coming up. That is, yes, it's going to be a very large milestone. One issue that's going to become dominant in that probably is the question of whether or not it can address issues outside the DNL 65 boundary. And so far, the judgment seems to be not. However, I would point out, and I have evidence, and I can show you that in previous Part 150s that the Port of Seattle has done, they did made recommendations about changes outside the DNL 65 boundary, specifically northbound departures, late night northbound departures that were heading east. The suggestion was made to have them go through Elliott Bay and do a corkscrew departure effectively, where they gain lots of altitude over the water before making a turn to go and head east. And that only impacts communities outside the DNL 65 boundary, specifically some of the east side communities, sparing them that late night departure noise. So that's fact, it has happened. So we'll be talking a lot about Part 150 over the next year. All right, thank you.
Thank you, David. That concludes our sign-ups for general in-person and virtual public comment. Is there anybody who did not sign up in advance who's with us online or in the room that would like to address the commission? Going once and going twice. Then that concludes public comment. Thank you all very much. And hearing no further testimony, our next order of business is the consent agenda.
Madam Commission President, we do have one written comment. Would you like me to note that for the record?
Please do note.
Thank you. The written comment today is received from Gordon Philip Baldwin, who asked the Port Commission and the Port to cease with any plans to build a new cruise terminal in Seattle, asking the Port to consider climate considerations and communities overwhelmed by cruise tourism. And that concludes our written comments received today.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered separately immediately after adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. So with that, Commissioners, is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 8A through E?
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been made by Commissioner Cho and seconded by Commissioner Fellman. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name is called for approval of the consent agenda.
Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you, 5 ayes, 0 nays.
The motion carries unanimously. All righty. And now we have one unfinished business item today. This item was postponed from the May 13th Commission meeting, and the main motion is currently on the floor. So Clerk Hart, would you do me a favor and please read the item into the record, and then Deputy Executive Director Goon will introduce it.
My pleasure. This is agenda item 9A. Commission determination that a competitive process is not appropriate or cost effective in accordance with RCW 53-19-020 sub 5, and authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with Maritime Blue for the Quiet Sound program in the amount of $250,000.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Quiet Sound is a voluntary non-regulatory initiative dedicated to reducing the cumulative impacts of vessel noise and disturbance on the endangered southern resident killer whales through their range in Washington state. The program advances this mission by promoting science-based collaborative strategy, including vessel slowdown initiatives and real-time whale detection systems. This request seeks to continue the Port's long-standing financial and strategic support for Quiet Sound, ensuring this critical work can advance for the benefit of our marine environment, our communities, and our regional economy. With us today is John Sloan, Senior Manager, Environmental Programs.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners. We have a slide deck I think we're bringing up. Again, John Sloan. I'm a Senior Environmental Manager with Maritime Environment Sustainability Department. And I had the pleasure of helping to stand up the Quiet Sound program on behalf of the Port under your leadership back in 2018 and 19. And it's very exciting to be here some years later, reporting on its successes and requesting approval for a 5-year service agreement. Next slide, please. So the request is to approve a service agreement in the amount of $250,000 for the duration of 5 years. This service agreement has been determined consistent with an MOU that was approved by Commission between the Port and Maritime Blue back in November of 2024. In addition to the service agreement request, we're requesting an exemption from the competitive requirements of RCW 53.19.0205. Next slide. Little background, the Quiet Sound was stood up in response to the Governor Inslee's Orca Task Force, in particular Recommendation 22, which asked us to create a program, asked us being the broader world, create a program similar to ECHO, which they have up at the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. It's a very successful program, and then coordinate with ECHO on transboundary efforts to reduce noise impacts on southern resident killer whales, specifically from large commercial vessels of the sort that the Port of Seattle supports. Secondarily, we were to provide funding for acoustic monitoring networks in Puget Sound, amongst other things. We were quite proud to have hired the facilitator, Floyd Snyder, to impanel a leadership group to stand the committee up back in 2018, 2019, and then in 2019 and 20, the decision of that group was to recruit Maritime Blue to create the program and lead it. We had participation at that time from a lot of stakeholders, Washington State Ferries, the Marine Exchange, the Coast Guard, some tribal representation, the cruise industry, and others. Many of those same stakeholders became part of a leadership committee once the charter was adopted. Next slide. Accomplishments to date. One of the primary accomplishments is that we just completed the 3rd year of voluntary vessel slowdowns within a strategic area of the Salish Sea where southern residents are known to ply the waters. The slowdowns very successful. 2023-24 slowdown asked vessels to slow from anywhere from their normal 18 or 19 knots down to 14.5 if you're a cruise ship or a container ship. If you're a bulker, which are known to be louder, it requested voluntary participation to slow to 11 knots. In 23-24, there was 71% participation in that voluntary program, and the program this year for 2024-25 just wrapped up in January, and the data is still being processed, but it looks like there was around 66% participation in the most recent year. Other accomplishments include that the program has strengthened sightings networks through funding and collaboration. That includes the Orca network, who provides detection into the whale report alert system by a pretty vast network of folks who live along the shorelines, who work on the water, who, when they see a southern resident, report that to Orca network, who in turn makes that data available to a system called Whale Report Alert System. That data is given to commercial mariners so that they can adjust their speed and behave accordingly when they know there's a whale within 10 nautical miles. Other accomplishments are legislative advocacy. The program, Quiet Sound program, helped to establish the Coast Guard's whale desk, establish funding streams for conservation of southern residents, and many other things. We've been a participant in that as a member of the leadership committee. And as mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of coordination with ECHO, the British Columbia program that it's modeled after. Next slide. The funding outlook for 25-26, Quiet Sound does sort of a zero-based budgeting. They do their budget every year rather than sort of a baseline-based budgeting. And the coming year, as you would expect, reflects some anticipated reduction from federal funding sources, possibly up to $500,000. Primary funding source is still Washington State through the Puget Sound Partnership. A number of philanthropic partners and sources are either active in funding the program or being recruited to fund in the program. Port of Seattle, Tacoma, and the Seaport Alliance. I think we're about 25% of the total funding picture, with the Port of Seattle being 6.6% of that combined package. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's a loss of federal funding that's anticipated. You see that here in several line items that are zeroed out. Facilitation, several line items related to hydrophones and gathering acoustic data, which is so important for orca conservation. The items that are being funded, continued funding for Orca Network and sightings to get sightings data into RAS, which is also proposed for funding. There's some modeling necessary for the vessel slowdowns. And then the whale spotter, you see near the bottom of that table. It's a new thermal imaging camera that was installed at Point Wilson that's showing a lot of promise. There was an idea that there would be a second spotting camera on the opposite bank line of Puget Sound so they could get coverage across the entire sound. That's been zeroed out, but there is money to maintain Whale Spotter 1 in hopes that in the future we'll be able to install more of those. Next slide. So the commission exemption needed for the competitive requirements are because this program was set up for a very specific reason to respond to Orca Task Force Recommendation 22. And it really is the only way that we can collaborate and participate with our partners like Washington State Ferries and the Marine Exchange and others. There is no other sort of program that would compete for this work. Next slide. Reiterate the request. We're looking for approval of a $250,000 service agreement, the duration of 5 years, and that we exempt that service agreement from the competitive process requirements. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Fellman, you asked that the item be postponed for further work from staff. So are there any questions from you at this time?
I just want to express my support for the exemption. It seems pretty odd that we would find another organization to be able to do this job. And but I do understand that just for people's edification, the reason we slow down vessels is it's about a decibel a knot. It's a logarithmic scale, so 3 knots is about a halving of the noise. So that's why the slowdown is an important thing for reducing the masking of the killer whale's echolocation capabilities to forage. But I understand this year at 66% compliance is a little lower than we've had in the past, and the collective we. And that, the goal was to obviously increase compliance over time. And my understanding is that it's the oil tankers that are the least compliant. Is that the case?
I really haven't seen the report out. It actually just hit my inbox this afternoon. So I don't know exactly where that's coming from, but we can certainly follow up and report back.
Because I'm just curious if indeed it's not, shipping wide, if it's just a proportional thing, but if indeed there is a particular, I understand cruises being rather compliant, but it's really on the shoulder of the cruise season. But so if there is a target audience, I'd like to be able to know that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, the motion was previously made and seconded. So Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote. Commissioners will say aye or nay when their name's called.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
I will be abstaining from this since I sit on the board of the Maritime Booth.
Thank you. Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasakawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
And the motion carries. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
presentation. All right. Bringing us forward, we have one new business item today. Clerk Hart, please read the item into the record. Deputy Executive Director Goon will then introduce it.
Thank you. This is agenda item 10A, introduction of resolution number 3836, a resolution amending resolution number 3737 and the diversity and contracting policy directive to increase women and minority business opportunities.
Thank you much.
Commissioners, at the beginning of 2024, you passed an order directing us to update our diversity and contracting goals to have a port-wide WMBE goal of 15% of total port spend and to work with 400 firms. I'm pleased to report we are trending in the right direction. This resolution proposes updates to the program that would apply through 2030. Joining us today is V. Nguyen, Commission Strategic Advisor, and Lawrence Coleman, Manager women, minority business enterprises, diversity, and contracting.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is V. Nguyen, once again for the record, Strategic Advisor in the Port of Seattle Commission Office. I'm joined today by Lawrence Coleman of the Diversity and Contracting Team. We're here today to introduce the item in front of you, Resolution 3836. This resolution is an update to Resolution 3737, which established the Port's Diversity and Contracting Program via directive. Approved in, next slide, please. Approved in January 2018, the Port's Diversity and Contracting Program set goals and a timeline to increase the number of women and minority-owned businesses, or business enterprises, or WIMBY, that are contracted with the Port, both by dollar amount and number of contracts, data collection and annual report to the public and commission. Other important elements include technical assistance, trainings, outreach, conducting studies to evaluate our efforts, and tools to support the success of the program, which were also part of the launch of the Diversity and Contracting Program. Next slide, please. Today's resolution, once approved, will provide updates to the goals of this program that will increase dollars spent and utilization of WIMBY businesses. It also adds a construction business definition and goal to increase opportunities. It adds business demographics such as small business enterprises and veteran-owned businesses under the umbrella of our diversity and contracting efforts. As part of what we have learned from the last few years of the program, areas for growth include additional data collection on timely dispatch of workers, improving the prompt payment and change order processes, and leveraging alternative delivery methods to increase the number of contracts between diverse businesses and the Port. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Coleman, to take us through the next part of our presentation.
And again, for the record, my name is Lawrence Coleman. I serve as the Diversity and Contracting Women and Minority Business Program Manager here at the Port. I'm here on behalf of Diversity and Contracting. Mian Rice, our director, couldn't be here today, but he certainly sends his greetings and appreciation for the commission. Go ahead to the next slide for me, please. And we just came here a couple of weeks ago to chat and share an update with regards to program progress. And so I won't go into details, but really just wanted to provide just some context to the new goals. As V mentioned, the policy directive and the goal is split into two pieces. You know, one is the number of the number of firms that we're trying to see to it that get opportunities, and then there's a number goal, which is, ultimately a percentage. What this slide is showing is just some progress when we talk about the number of firms that we work with. I believe that, when we establish a number with the number of firms that we work with, I think it keeps our program honest. I think it keeps us honest, where I think there's times where you can hide behind percentages, but I think with numbers, you can't really hide much there. We do want to just call out just some contributors, if you will, where we see utilization. And so when we talk about the number of firms, it's not always a significant dollar amount per se, but we see lots of our departments that have purchase cards make intentional efforts to use businesses, and so we certainly feel like a contributor and a significant driver to that number is through purchase cards. And then some of the challenges which we've expressed here in detractors. It's at the end of the day, we're working on improving our data collection infrastructure. I think we've talked last, and we've come here a couple of times to talk about some of those challenges. For example, if someone intentionally works with a mom and pop shop, you might have some challenges with helping getting them identified, and so just wanted to point that out. The other part of when we talk about the policy directive and the goal is the utilization of women and minority businesses. And so in the past, under the previous benchmark, we established a 15% goal. We didn't quite hit that. We hit 14%. But I also like to remind folks and even the commissioners that we were at 5%, prior to us being intentional to getting to 14%. So certainly still got some ways to go. And, again, stopping short of hitting that 15% and achieve 14%. But we don't believe we should go backwards or stay stagnant. And so you'll see here we're recommending 16% as the new goal that we'll work towards. A couple other things to mention here is that in the past we didn't have a construction goal, and we do know that construction is a significant driver. And so by some of our estimations, we figure if we hit 14% consistently, we should be able to get to that 16% overall goal on all port spending. Some utilization drivers, obviously lots of the contract proposals that come through the port, folks that want to do business with us. We have different requirements and such that are built into solicitations that help us get opportunities, and so I say that's a significant driver. But some of the challenges, and again, as we express as detractors, the capital program, we're always trying to strike this balance between bundling for efficiency and unbundling projects for inclusion efforts. And then a few other challenges, project labor agreements, some of the elements connected to those, cash flow, prompt payment, and bonding and insurance is, and I would say these are common themes throughout not just our region, but when we talk about some of the programs, right? And so, but these are things that we work on and that we will commit to working on over the next iteration of the program. Go ahead to the next slide for me, please. And then just taking us home, I just have just a few more things to share. Just some updates. Just over the course of the program, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, we found that we needed some additional support in monitoring and keeping an eye on some of the goals that we set. And so we were able to bring on what we're calling a WIMBY advisor, someone to keep a closer eye on utilization. At the port, uniquely, we do allow for firms to be self-identified, right? And so that comes with some challenges as well. And so, in thinking about how can we see to it that the dollars are going to those who it's intended for, we're working on attestation throughout all solicitations, contracts, and, ways, and when you choose to do work with the port, just ensuring that, the money's going to who it's intended for. Again, trying to think about ways to incorporate just a wider variety of firms. We've heard from smaller A&E diverse firms and small firms that they don't get opportunities. They're not always able to participate on some of the larger projects. And so we're working on making some adjustment to our professional services categories, trying to develop a roster for A&E businesses. In the small workspace, I think Mian uses the term, he's a football guy, so he always uses football terminology. And so I think he called this small ball, and just wanted to shout my guy out. But limited public works. And just really quick, I think the value and how we know it's working is like when you see a firm that left their business, or excuse me, left employment, decided to take a small works job, then they get committed to as a major sub, and then they get committed to, and then they're working as a prime. And we've seen that. And so that's the benefit and the value of leveraging some of these smaller programs and these smaller efforts where you're not just giving dollars, but helping folks grow their business.
And Lawrence, if I may, I just do want to highlight this one in particular because during the roundtables that the commission office led, the number one thing that we heard from the small businesses that we engaged with was just increased opportunity and access. And so I think this is one of the areas where it can really help open that door, have more people participate, and just really help people grow their capacity, their business, and really meet what they asked us for, which is access to opportunity.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for dovetailing that, V. And just a couple more things. We're always in the space of trying to provide support and information to our firms, to try to help folks grow. And so, as I mentioned earlier, some challenges with project labor agreements, they're not going anywhere, right? And so we need to work stronger with our labor partners. And so we're making some commitments to do some additional trainings to support firms. And then lastly, trying to get in front of just challenges with insurance and bonding, and so doing some feasibility studies on OSIPs, or owner-controlled insurance policies. You can go to the next slide for me, please. And then lastly, just to take us home, I'm always mindful of major success. I would say major progress, I think, is the fairest thing to say. We're always thinking about continuous improvements, ways that we can better not only support our firms, support our goals and advance them. I think these programs and this program in particular, I think helps the port be competitive. I think healthy competition, I think, is in best value to a public agency that's, that's entrusted with public dollars. And so that's how we see this program, certainly, helps the social elements, but also I think it helps us remain competitive as well. Over the course of the program, I think we, again, as I mentioned, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so who knew that all industries were different, so we, we learned that, right? And so, for example, we may, it doesn't make sense to set, let's just say, a 15% goal on a baggage optimization project if there aren't, folks in that industry. And those are just some of the things that we learned, over the course of administering the program. And then lastly, I just, remind us that, construction is a major driver. And, there's lots of moving parts, lots of elements to construction. And so, but for us to achieve the 16% goal and that number goal of 500, we're certainly going to need to see that construction be increased. And just lots of work and lots of elements that's going to take, lots of work that's going to help us get there, and that's going to be needed. With that, that concludes my remarks, and happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Congrats on sandwiching over half a year's worth of work into a 20-minute presentation. So I'm going to open it up to my colleagues for questions and comments, and we'll begin with Commissioner Cho.
No, I just wanted to, I know you followed up me after our initial presentation on this with regards to why we don't go with the fixed amount on contracting and we stick with a percentage. I guess what I'll say is that it's kind of a catch-22, right? In the sense that I think one of your explanations was if we spend more one year, then we potentially lose out on the ability to spend more with DBEs. But I do think that just because you set a goal doesn't mean it's a cap, right? So if there is a year where we spend more, you could easily exceed the 15%, right? But I think the argument you made with me that was more convincing was that if there is a year where we don't spend as much and we have a high goal, you could miss your targets. And so I understand why you prefer the sliding scale, so to speak, as opposed to the fixed goals, and so I just want to thank you, Mian, for following up with that, and commend you on your great work. Going from 5 to 14% is no small feat. Looking forward to us getting through that last 1% and seeing where we can go, but more importantly, I hope that we're somehow able to solve this issue of a bottleneck around there actually being enough DBEs out there to meet our goals, right? And I think part of the challenge that I see for us, and not just us, but all organizations that have these DBE goals, is like you can set a goal of 30%, but if the businesses don't exist out there for us to reach that goal, we're just setting ourselves up for failure, in essence, right? And so I think there's a broader conversation around what our role is in helping foster those minority small business owners to start sprouting up and growing to a point where they can do business with us. And I think there's a larger coalition that needs to be built among the different public sector entities around how we can start fostering the cultivation of these businesses. But it's a conversation for another time. Thank you, and I look forward to voting in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Mohammed.
Thank you for the time. I also am looking forward to supporting this item today. And I wanted to say thank you for the attention to the issues around prompt payment. I see that has been included in there. You've outlined a plan to define, to implement, and monitor processes for timely payment and change order processing. My follow-up question is there an anticipated timeline when that definition will be put in place? And when can we expect to see changes or improvements to those payment timelines for contractors, suppliers, and subcontractors.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. We don't have an exact timeline, but I can tell you that we're working closely with the Central Procurement Office to develop one. They're working on several lean efforts as we speak that'll get going this year, and we'll have some timelines that we can update you on as soon as we can.
Great.
Yeah, and one of the things that they are also prioritizing is recovery from the cyber attack. So that is, it's in the queue, it's in the works. It's been a part of the conversation all along with Director Mayo, and it is understood that this is a priority by the Commission.
Could the Deputy Director?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. I know it's in their business plan for this year. I think they're targeting third quarter for tackling that issue, so we could provide you with a more specific timeline.
That would be really helpful because I would want to know when the procurement office is going to take that up and when we can just anticipate some changes. That is something that I consistently hear from the subcontractors, and so I think being able to put some timeline around it, realistic timelines on when they can anticipate some change would be helpful for them, for us to be transparent about what we intend to do.
We can give you an update.
Thank you. Thank you again for the presentation, and I do look forward to supporting this item today.
Commissioner Calkins.
Just a comment. There was an article, I think in yesterday's paper, about the high number of manufacturing jobs that are sitting unfilled in the United States right now, which sort of goes against the current of, I think, conventional wisdom, which is that we're losing manufacturing jobs, and these we've got all these workers without opportunities. And I think both things can be true in that instance, and I think we're in a similar situation here, where at the same time that it is hard for us to find qualified contractors to be able to fulfill all the work that we're engaging in, particularly over the next decade, it can also be true that deserving minority and WIMBY businesses are not able to access some of the work that we offer. And so that disconnect is really what we're trying to address here. And that work requires years and thoughtfulness and these conversations that Chair Hasegawa and others have led over the last few years to determine what are the obstacles to achieving these higher aspirational goals. And unfortunately, there were no easy answers to a lot of this stuff. Some of the things, and I think mostly what we're talking about today, is a lot of the internal work we need to do. But I also just want to remind folks that the port needs to be part of a system of public agencies and large employers who are willing to invest in the upstream, the sort of long-term, getting more women and people of color into apprenticeship programs so that in 5 years they can be a journeyman, and in 10 years they can venture out on their own and become a subcontractor, and then begin to qualify. So we have some near-term work and we have some long-term work, and the long-term work is going to require being a part of a handful of public agencies and large employers who commit to doing that upstream work too. So yes, I will support this.
Commissioner Feldman.
Thank you for the presentation and for your ongoing efforts to reach for the stars, as it were. But the question I was having is, like, how big is the galaxy, kind of following up with that illusion and with Commissioner Cho's point. I mean, when you set these goals, it would be kind of interesting to know what are the number of businesses in each of those fields that you're drawing from, that you're using to set your assessment. I'm not sure, I mean, in terms of, I think we just see unless it's someplace I'm missing, but we see your goals being set, but I don't know what the universe you're drawing from is. Is that in there and I'm just missing it?
Not in the policy and the agency goal, but every contract that gets let, and so that you all hear that has an aspirational goal, there's significant work that happens that we call a WIMBY, or diversity analysis, where we look at availability in industries. We also consider historical utilization, our historical utilization as well. And so I would say that the goals just aren't necessarily just made up, and I'm not saying that you're saying that, but there are some folks that think that, but there's some significant analysis that happens before we propose a goal. I'd say this goal took into consideration not necessarily how many firms were out there for the agency, rather our historical utilization, and so how we did leading up to this policy directive and what we did in the last 5 years. But I would say I totally hear you, understand you, and it's certainly best practice that we follow to ensure that before contract goals are let, that there is a significant analysis that's done that reviews availability in various industries.
Well, as you noted, I have no doubt that you have a methodology, but I guess I'm just asking you to show your work. It would be kind of interesting if we want to encourage, internships or something like that in specific business lines, that we would know where you have less to draw from and where we could lean in or something.
Yeah, and thank you for that reminder, V. Disparity study, which we've had, I think the industry practice was 3 to 5 years, and I want to say we just wrapped up one, so we can certainly absolutely get you that information.
Great, and I thank you for that. I was, insurance is always one of the challenges, and I never heard of the owner's controlled insurance policies. Is this something that's always existed?
Yes, they have, and admittedly, insurance is not my my bag either, and so I could certainly get you some information. But
no problem. I mean, I was trying to get educated myself, but I do appreciate the fact. I think you almost quoted Donald Rumsfeld about the known knowns that we know and don't know. But I don't know. I'd get that quote straight before the next presentation. Anyway. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. I do think our Chief of Staff, Aaron Pritchard, has just a point of information for us.
Yeah, to Commissioner Mohammed's question, I do know that you requested that before we introduced that for a specific date. And me and I did work with CPO to identify a date in Section 5C7 that says that you will have this information that to improve contracting in support of WIMBY, SBE, and VBEs, for developing a proposed process for prompt payments to subcontractors. Proposing this process come to commission for consideration by the second quarter of 2026.
Is that still in there?
It is in there by the end of the second quarter of 2026. Yeah, and that was
I'm
your
glad you
request,
adopted
and
that.
Yes,
me and
we
I
did.
got that in, but probably didn't share with the presenters.
Oh, yes, that's part of the reason for the
I
timeline.
like a timeline.
Yep, we made sure to be able to accommodate that exact provision, which is the reason, part of the reason for this two-part process and the hearing coming before us today instead of last meeting. So thank you so much for this body of work. It's been ongoing for a very long time, and I just want to acknowledge sort of the elephant in the room and the context with all of us are operating is that we've had ongoing conversations with our business stakeholders, our WIMBY business owners specifically, who have long taken issue with port processes, right? And we committed to being able to examine those closely. And the truth of the matter is that PLAs are here to stay, right? But we have lots that we can do to in our tool bag to be able to be aggressive on our goals to impact and improve WIMBY utilization. And we're also operating within a climate where there's a federal government that is proactively attacking DBEs, programs, WIMBY utilization, and an active court case that's happening as well. We have long said from this dais that local government is where we can and should be leading on our progressive programming. And there is nothing that's going on right now that says that we cannot be more audacious in WIMBY utilization. And there's lots that we can still do to improve our numbers. And so I do want to acknowledge the progress that we've made in the last 5 years, from 5% to 16 where we are today. But we're an ambitious group. So when we say we've blown past our goals, that tells us that we need to be even more audacious. And that's what this proposal is. I'd like to recognize your team. I'd like to recognize V from the Commission office, working together with all of our business stakeholders who have come to the table more times than they can count over the course of years to bring us to this point. Most recently, we held a series around this specific resolution. 3 different roundtables. I attended all of them. Commissioner Cho joined another one, Commissioner Mohammed joined another one, Commissioner Calkins joined another one, and Commissioner Fellman would have if we held one more. But you have unanimous support for this effort from this body. And so I'd like to thank you for bringing us today. Just one question before I call the question. In the matter of attestation, what does it do? And are there any current allegations of compromised integrity of WIMBY utilization right now? The idea being that people self-proclaim that they are being WIMBYs. An attestation is just a piece of paper that they sign. What does this do? How will it be used?
Yeah, to be clear, we've never had an allegation, at least that I'm aware of, that someone is not a WIMBY. I think for our purposes, I think it gives some assurances to the community because folks, we're proponents of certification, right? You know, we have unique work. I think sometimes that where folks may not want to go get certified, and we want to honor that and still be able to encourage their utilization and being able to count. But we have seen some data challenges, and so just the various data sources, and so just having that attestation gives us some confidence that this firm is in fact true indeed a woman or minority business, and so we'll do that through the various solicitation documents that we have, and then on the back end, just to make sure that folks are true indeed, meet the ownership and control criteria that we've established.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge it's sort of like crossing T's and dotting I's and being an administrative best practice, even if it's not, signed in front of, a notary or anything like that. It is receipts, so thank you for that. And V, to what you said of what we were hearing in a lot of those meetings was increasing opportunities and increasing access, right? Those are 2 separate things. We're not just setting goals without setting out, prescribing how we would like to see that happen. And so, actually having adjustments to our architects and engineering program and our limited public works program. These are all things that I'm really glad to see written down and acted upon. And the executive director does have a lot of opportunity within the policy as written to be able to increase our WIMBY numbers. So thank you again to everybody. Thank you to our Chief of Staff, Aaron Pritchard, who attended all of the stakeholder meetings, who's done a lot of work behind the scenes to help get this to where it is. Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues before we move forward? Then I think that we're ready to go ahead and call the question. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been made by Commissioner Cho and seconded by Commissioner Mohammed. Clerk Hart, to be clear, the motion's been made and seconded to approve introduction of the resolution, and it's going to come back before us for formal adoption at the July 8th meeting. With that, Clerk Hart, please do call the roll.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Calkins.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you, and Commissioner Hoskawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Thank you. It carries unanimously, and we will see you back here on July 8th.
Wait, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Was your last presentation just a I feel like we're doing
That
this
was
twice.
that was a presentation,
Okay, so-
and this is on a resolution being introduced. The
Okay.
last presentation had nothing to do with the resolution, but is background information that lends itself towards this. Commissioner Mohammed?
Will it come up on consent the following time?
I believe it will,
Okay.
but we'll still see you here. Thank you very much. Phew. That was a big one, y'all. Casually moving forward. We're now at presentations and staff reports. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record. Deputy Executive Director Goon will then introduce it.
Thank you. This is agenda item 11A, Snow Valley Responsible Tourism Project Briefing.
Commissioners, this item provides an update on the port support for responsible tourism in the Snoqualmie Valley and outlines potential next steps. Thanks to your leadership in May 2024, the port executed a $50,000 contract with Snow Valley Chamber to advance foundational work on destination stewardship guided by Global Sustainable Tourism Council criteria and initiated at the direction of Commissioner Fellman. Port support enabled participation in the state's rural tourism support program, ensuring engagement from local stakeholders, land managers, and the Snoqualmie tribe. The program has concluded, and the Chamber will present its findings, including proposed next step and a recommendation to explore forming a new destination management organization. Leading the conversation today is Nick Leonti, Director of Tourism Development, and he'll be introducing our guest today.
Yes. Hello, Commissioners. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Nick Leonti, Director of Tourism Development at the Port, and it's always a treat to come share our tourism work with you at these meetings. We have a large group today. You can see them all sitting behind me. You thought you were just really popular today. That's our group. We have a lot of speakers to get to. So I'm going to keep it really brief. As you know, the Port's Tourism Department aims to further responsible tourism practices in our region. And last year, following the leadership of Commissioner Fellman, we entered into an agreement to provide funding to the Snow Valley Chamber of Commerce so they could have resources to participate in the Rural Tourism Support Program, or RTS program, provided by State of Washington Tourism. This foundational work is a first step in creating a positive economic, social, and environmental cycle of tourism in the region, and Port funding ensured that the right folks, including Snoqualmie Tribe, were at the table for this process. So today I'm pleased to be joined by key leaders in the RTS program to present the Commission with an update on the work that has been done so far and what the future may bring to Snow Valley. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce Mike Moe, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Tourism Development at the State of Washington Tourism.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mike Moe. I'm the Director of Tourism Development and Strategic Partnership for State of Washington Tourism. I just wanted to provide a little context for this program from State of Washington Tourism. Since reopening the State Tourism Office, helping rural and underserved communities optimize tourism has been one of the pillars of our organization. The Rural Tourism Support Program that we ran in Snoqualmie Valley is a part of our larger Destination Development Program that includes grants for underserved communities and professional development webinars. This was the fourth Rural Tourism Support Program, or RTS program, that we've run in the state, including programs in northeastern Washington, north central Washington, and Walla Walla. Our fifth RTS program is just kicking off now in Skagit Valley. We selected Kristen Dahl from Cross Current to facilitate this program because of her rich experience designing and leading impactful community-based destination development and management programming in Oregon when she was with Travel Oregon, and then across the Northwest for the past 5 years. The RTS program in Snow Valley was mostly funded by EDA funds awarded to SWT for destination planning and development. And we selected this region because we wanted to bring the leaders of this beautiful community together to harness tourism, work together to overcome challenges, and create a positive impact. And so with that, I will turn it over to Kelly Coughlin, the Executive Director of Snow Valley Chamber.
Now can you hear me? Thank you very much, the Port of Seattle, for all of you commissioners. We appreciate you so much more than you'll ever know. The Port of Seattle support has been absolutely critical to this phase of our journey, and without it, we simply would not survive. The Snoqualmie Valley is the most unique area in King County, a place where natural beauty, rural charm, and deep cultural heritage intersect. We are your playground. Whether it's hiking to waterfalls, biking scenic trails, or exploring our historic towns, the valley is where the King County comes to reconnect with nature, with history, and each other. We welcome over 11 million visitors each year. Before COVID, most came from out of state, bringing higher spending power and stronger economic returns. But post-COVID and without sustained funding, our visitors now mostly come from the regions in like the Tri-Cities with significantly lower median income. That shift is impacting our local economy and small businesses in real time. With your support, we've tackled some of our biggest regional challenges: overcrowding at popular destinations, a disjointed visitor experience, and a lack of cohesion regional storytelling. This work was only possible through the true collaboration with business owners, tribal communities, land managers, residents, and regional stakeholders. And to stretch your investment even further, we leverage port funding by also securing a Washington tourism grant alongside the pilot program, expanding both the reach and the impact of your dollars. Together, we've built momentum to advance economic development, environmental stewardship, and authentic cultural connection throughout the Snoqualmie Valley. Port funding also enabled a meaningful partnership with the Snoqualmie tribe, including direct financial support for their participation, an essential step toward ensuring equity and representation in their work. And while we are not pursuing formal GSTC certification because it's not logistically feasible for our region at this time, your funding has allowed us to train our team to align with global sustainable tourism standards. We're committed to operating with the same responsibilities and values certification represents. This momentum is powerful, but it cannot continue without your ongoing support. And thank you. Now I'd like to introduce you to Kristen Dow, CEO of the Cross Current Collective, who served as the lead facilitator for the Rural Tourism Support Program.
Okay, all right. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Thanks for having us. I'm just going to walk us through a little bit of the process of where we've been and where we're ending up with the Snoqualmie Valley, and we're going to have a couple of additional folks join me as well from the region. So next slide, please. So when we're invited into a region, our first step is to really define what that destination looks like. So in the Snoqualmie Valley, we spent some time working with our partner, Kelly and her team, to really outline what the boundaries of the region would look like. And this area really includes some of the key attractions, as you probably know, the summit in Snoqualmie, the Snoqualmie National Forest, and the Snoqualmie River in its entirety down through Duval, and all of the farmlands within those areas. But it's really a soft boundary, and this is really important to recognize. Next slide. We look at the entire tourism ecosystem within a region or within a destination, and this kind of gives you a picture if you're able to see the slide, but we look at everyone in the tourism industry, the different land and resource managers, including transportation, economic development, community organizations, and important communities to center in this work. We spend some time with our partners really identifying who from those different aspects of the tourism ecosystem really ought to come forward and help lead an initiative. So next slide. So working with Kelly and her team and the State of Washington Tourism, as well as the Snoqualmie Tribe, a very robust leadership team was put together, inclusive of about 31 different organizations. Of course, many people in rural areas wear many hats, so there's even more than beyond this slide. But as you can see, there's a really rich leadership team that was assembled for the region, and this is really the cornerstone of this work, which is developing large and complex collaborations to really adapt to the complex challenges that these type of rural regions face in their sort of tourism journey. Everyone who was invited to the table was really delighted to be there and contributed significantly throughout the process. Next slide. One of our first steps as a large leadership team is to set an intention. So many people will call these guiding principles, but collaboratively the 31 organizations and individuals really set the intention that's before you, very focused on diversity, stewardship, and really management of this destination. As you can see, the main intention is not just come one, come all, and come often, although that is part of the conversation. It's really about how do you evolve the visitation patterns over time so that you're hitting those off-peak days and off-peak seasons. Next slide. The other piece that we work with the leadership team is really customizing a very involved engagement process. So we start in the beginning in the first phase with a number of primary research projects. We research we study the visitor behavior, we study the stakeholders and what they're really looking for with the future of tourism, and then we also really do kind of a destination scan that helps inform all of the engagements that took place in the region. One of the things that we learn from stakeholders is that they're really interested in expanding educational opportunities for visitors, creating more opportunities to eat and drink locally grown, locally harvested, locally made things, evolving the outdoor rec experience kind of beyond what's currently there. And then around the management pieces, they're really looking to alleviate some of the traffic congestion issues that are taking place, as you can imagine or know, throughout the region, improving the litter management, which has been a big problem, and increasing the accessibility of the transportation options and making those a bigger part of the visitor experience. Moving into that second phase, we really start to engage the public, and we held 4 major workshops. The first one, a visioning and scenario workshop, where we really took a look at the future, mapped out 4 different scenarios, and got everyone's engagement on where they really want to head in the future. We held 3 more strategy sessions, one around destination stewardship more broadly, visitor management for high-use outdoor recreation destinations, and cultural tourism. And in each of those, we're really bringing in best practices and people from around the world who are doing really good work in this space, and then working collaboratively with the group of, sometimes 60-ish people in the room to roll up their sleeves and really talk about what needs to happen next in the region. In that third phase, we work with that steering committee to form a more longer-standing destination leadership team, which is now in place, that involves the majority of those 31 organizations, many of those same individuals, and then there was a number of new individuals added and new organizations that were sort of discovered along the way that needed to be part of the longer-standing effort. That leadership team is, again, cornerstone to this project. It is what holds the glue together behind all of the priority actions that will be coming around and actually already starting. We'll talk about that here in 1 minute. But that role of that destination leadership team is critical. Now, this is being convened by the Snow Valley Chamber, and it includes, like I said, all of those diverse organizations. Their job is to really uphold this very detailed vision of success, which I'll share with you next, and then to support the implementation of priority projects in the region over time, okay? It's really easy to design a process and kick off a few projects, but it's really hard to create the glue of these complex collaborations that can really stand the test of time and do this work over the long term. Most of the solutions are not short-term solutions. And then to continue to build trust amongst the players who are at that table. Next slide, please. So the major outcome, the major outcome is really the leadership team and the priority action teams that are in motion at the moment, but everyone now has a 15-year vision of success. It's actually 2 slides if you want to shift to the second slide. You can read this at your leisure. I think you have the full report. We work really hard with the folks who turned out to the workshops and the leadership team to craft a vision that is what we would call a goal story. So it's very specific. It articulates what they actually want to see on the ground in 15 years. And this is to basically hold sort of a North Star for the region that they can come back to. Once that first round of priority projects has been completed, they can come back and see what else they might want to work on. Many regions will adapt this vision over time. After 6 or 7 years, they'll come back in and do some editing, context changes, et cetera. But you can see it includes many of the same points as was in the statement of intent, but this is now a much more detailed and articulate and clear vision to come back to. And lastly, next slide, they, as a leadership team, came together and looked at the slate of potential actions that were generated through the process and selected 6 to rally around and assemble resources in order to implement them. One around responsible visitation, visitor transportation, a valley-wide heritage trail that would follow along the river, kind of bringing the diversity of different heritages to life. Valley-wide mural maps, which would basically, they will be coming to life in each of the towns within the region, creating a destination management and marketing organization, and then eventually developing a valley-wide brand. Now, not all of these are happening right out of the gates, but they are being staged over the next couple of years. So I'm going to wrap up. That's the kind of result of this effort. Thank you for your investment, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Caroline Villanueva from Mountains to Sound Greenway, who's been an illustrious steering committee member and destination leadership team participant.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, commissioners, for having us. My name is Caroline Villanova, and I work at the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust, and I was a member of the steering committee and have been a part of the destination leadership team. So I really today just wanted to highlight how this whole process and program really brought a light to a vibrant community, many communities, as well as the places within the congressionally designated Mountains to Sound Greenway National Heritage Area. This whole process really, everyone involved just shared how much they loved the Snoqualmie Valley. So how much they wanted to care and celebrate the valley. That was pretty much every community workshop, every steering committee was all around that. And the conversations kind of circled around how do we make sure this area isn't loved to death. A place like the Snoqualmie Valley that has like a large landscape, so many different communities, vibrant heritage and cultural heritage, really needs this collaborative framework and network and strong relationships to make sure some of these ideas that Kristen just shared can stay living and stay connected. So I'm just here to, one, thank the Port for your support and thank the State of Washington Tourism for their support of this program, and also really encourage that long-term sustainability of thinking, how can we have this destination tourism work continue in the Valley through dedicated staff, dedicated organizations who are working on this. And then I also just wanted to thank everyone up here for allowing my participation, and also for your future support and collaboration on just this tourism ecosystem and the whole state. So thank you, and I'll pass it off to Wade.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wade Sugiyama. I'll close this out here. I'm a 10-year resident of Snoqualmie. I'm a small business owner and a member of the chamber. Fully support all the work that the team has done. Just really love everything that everyone has done. As I reflect back, I was thinking a little bit early in my career, I worked a little bit with some VCs and angel investors, and they used to always say over and over that when they invest in early stage companies and early ideas, just as much as anything else, they are investing in the people that are involved. And you may have thought of that as you have been going through this process and as you invest in other communities around the area. But I just want to validate, for me personally, and it's kind of my own perspective, that the people you've invested in are great people. Kelly, Amy, Caroline, Kristen, all these people and everybody, the communities that have been involved are fantastic people to invest in. So validating a little bit of what you've done, and this is the right people to bring your visions to life. I think that's been something that I've seen. And I'd say we're going to continue, we and they are going to continue to raise additional funds to keep things moving. We're working on trailblazing a new sustainable funding model. And then, of course, pushing all of these projects forward as best we can, according to the GSTC guidelines, of course. We really appreciate, we're really grateful to have the Port, have people like you to help us get there. And, this is just the beginning. So thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So at this time, we've got questions and comments from our commissioners, and I'll begin with Commissioner Feldman.
Thanks, guys, for putting faces and time to effort that is obviously worthwhile and that you all are still playing together. I like to see that. Just a quick step back, in my desire to see ecotourism type programs, sustainable tourism efforts, and sustainable tourism is like the superset. The eco version of it is what drew me to the Valley, and it has like all the food groups, right? You have the nature, you have the people, including the willingness of tribes to participate in tourism, which is a rare thing in the state of Washington, and that you also have this proximity to the urban center, and my concern that, quite frankly, that the Port could be a tremendous contributor to the pressure through cruise and other easy access, and that I was saying to myself, well, look, if we're going to be rah-rah, I want to make sure that the communities are prepared to catch the ball. That could be a great benefit, but also could be, more than you asked for. And so that's why, the idea of, tourism and then outdoor recreation are really oftentimes historically separate entities. And I know in dealing with Mountain Sound Greenway, they're just trying to manage the local demand on this area. Go ahead, bring in all this more. What kind of favor am I doing you, right? So I was keenly concerned about it's happening anyway, and that was the other region. You're already experiencing over-tourism. So then what are the management tools that you could have, in having, Cross Currents expertise in helping steer that through was really great. But I got to say, the idea of going off and doing something in a place where, I don't live or have that much direct experience with, having Mountain Sound Greenway behind this, having all that historical investment in this area, knowing all the players, I got to tell you, having your participation is really, for me, knew that the right people would be at the table and it'd be a resource that everybody could tap. And having the chamber bringing the business community along with that is a really fantastic combination. And I'm delighted to see the fact that you were able to come up with a joint vision. Obviously, it's a long-term plan, as you clearly identified. The one, I have to say something, right? Just throwing flowers at you. The one entity that I've spoken to in the past that I don't think was part of the steering committee was Columbia Hospitality. And I'm just wondering, they're like this big destination at the top of the hill and obviously are managing the tribe's asset. I'm just wondering, did you invite them, or was there something that fell through the cracks?
Oh, we invited them, but I think they decided to go towards the tribal because they are, the Salish is the only thing now that they have up there. Before it was the club at Snoqualmie Ridge, and that is no longer. So they were allowing the tribe to step up and be that role.
That's great, because obviously their engagement, but right, with the tribe's blessing, and I have to say, having Jamie's engagement, I mean, Jamie has been like the liaison for Snoqualmie in so many different forums, and now she has yet another forum, but I'm hoping that she provides this umbrella for all of us to be able to benefit from, and then to have Impacoven at this combination of these people who are now really decision makers further encourages me that this was the right people to invest in. And so thank you for that. And I hope we can help you leverage additional resources into the future, because this snowball is beginning to roll. Thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner Fellman. Is there anybody else with questions?
Oh, actually,
no.
And Commissioner Mohammed was, the only other person that worked as my tag team on this tourism program, and I meant to acknowledge this right off the bat. So thank you for your support in getting this going.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mohammed.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Fellman, for your leadership in moving all of that forward, and I was happy to support it. I was also happy to attend the Snow Valley Chambers event last year, and it was a long drive, a beautiful drive up there, and just appreciated the time I was able to spend with your community and talking about economic development opportunities, and they were all just as excited. That was a full room, and I would say just about everybody in that room was just excited about the opportunities that the Snow Valley offers, and the opportunity to collaborate with the Port of Seattle. It was the same sort of enthusiasm that I was hearing there that I'm hearing today. And so I think this is a really special partnership, and I look forward to continuing to support it. And thank you so much for the presentation today. It was very informative and detailed. Thanks for the time.
All right, seeing no further questions or comments, we can move on. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to be here. It was a great presentation. All right, Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record. Our final item for the day, and Deputy Executive Director Goon will introduce it.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 11B, 2025 State Legislative Session Review.
Commissioners, this briefing provides an overview of the 2025 state legislative session, which concluded in May following the governor's final bill actions. Despite a challenging fiscal landscape, it was a strong year for the port's priorities. Our senior state governmental relations manager, John Flanagan, is joined by our contract lobbyist, Brooke Davies, to share more about some of our success in the last session and our preparation for the next one to come.
Please note for the record that Commissioner Calkins has exited the meeting.
Yeah, that will help, huh?
Thank you.
For the record, John Flanagan, Senior State Government Relations Manager here at the Port, joined today by our contract lobbyist, Brooke Davies. Unfortunately, our other contract lobbyist, Nick Struley, couldn't be here, but we're going to put him in front of y'all at some point for a different briefing sometime this summer. Wanted to start by letting Brooke introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Nice to see all of you. Brooke Davies.
Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of how this presentation is organized. Brooke is going to run you through some of the pre-session fiscal outlook, high-level rundown of the revenue package that was passed this year, and some other non-port related but newsworthy legislation that some of you might be curious about. Then I'll walk us through some high-level breakdown of legislation and budget highlights passed that were part of our pre-session legislative agenda that was adopted by the Commission. And throughout, we'll talk about places where we have some unfinished business policy items that we anticipate bringing back during the 2026 legislative session. Next slide, please. Take it away, Brooke.
All right. Thanks, John. So this last legislative session, I think you all are well aware, it was one of our long 105-day legislative sessions where the primary goal of the legislature is to pass a operating, capital, and transportation budget before they adjourn. Just to put some things into perspective, this session we had a new governor, lots of new state agency heads, over 25 brand new legislators. There were over 2,500 bills introduced this session, and just around 430 of them passed. I'm sure many of you are well aware, as was reported heavily heading into the session, the biggest thing facing the legislature this session was the budget deficit. As we headed into session, the number kept getting bigger and bigger, and by the time session started in January, it looked that we were going to be anywhere from $10 to $16 billion in the hole for the operating budget alone. This budget deficit's due to a couple things. Number one, the revenue growth that was assumed in balancing the budget didn't completely come to fruition. So they had assumed for a certain level of growth, and even though revenue collections weren't technically decreasing, they weren't increasing by the rate that the legislature had anticipated. There's also just an increase in the cost and services all across the board. That's the same thing for transportation as well. And then there was some federal funding that we had received during the COVID pandemic that was one-time funding that was used to fund things that the legislature wanted to keep going, and those are ongoing expenses. So with all of that in mind, the majority party released a big tax package, the House and Senate respectively. Their original tax package on the Senate side included things like a wealth tax, statewide payroll expense tax, similar to what we have in Seattle, but this would be statewide. And there were a couple dynamics in play. The business community largely had some concerns with the statewide payroll expense tax, thinking that taxing jobs make us less competitive. The governor came out and said, you know, I don't want to sign a budget that relies heavily on new and untested taxes, pointing to the wealth tax, and essentially asked for them to go back and look for some savings other places and come out with a new package, which they did towards the end of the session. We passed the biggest tax package in state history this year. I think it was the $9.4 billion in new taxes. That included a B&O increase across the board. That included a new sales and use tax on certain services, removal of several tax preferences, which was the one that had the most direct connection to the port. There was originally the removal of the preferential tax rate for stevedoring, but that was eventually removed. And then some other fee increases across the board. So ultimately, they were able to adjourn on time and pass a balanced budget. I think one important note, and John will speak to this a little bit later, but we're not completely out of the clear yet. There will be a new revenue projection coming out at the end of the week, and the governor has already issued some directives to agencies asking them to try and start reducing their expenses or come up with a plan that would be a reduction of 7 to 8%. And so, you know, along with that and some other things that in the budget, delaying implementation of certain programs that we know are coming, I think next session will be in a similar position. The deficit might not be as big, but certainly there's still work to be done. And then just very briefly, John's going to speak about the transportation package. This is the first time I've ever seen a transportation package just fly under the radar, but they did pass a new transportation package funded largely by an increase in the gas tax, and John's going to speak more in depth about that. And just couple of big policy bills that passed. The rent stabilization bill they've been working on for a long time finally passed, and also the UI for striking workers bill, which has been around for several sessions, finally passed as well.
We'll go to the next slide. So jumping into the port's priorities that were identified pre-session and how those things fared. So starting here with aviation, I went over, I think, most of this with y'all last time I was here when we talked about the START legislative agenda, but adding in some detail and a couple fine points on some things here. So as I mentioned already, the first annual Start Lobby Day happened this past year. We're already working on a shared draft agenda for next year as well. I actually will be at Start tomorrow evening to talk to them about what that agenda could look like. I think it'll look really similar, frankly, to a lot of what we already pursued this year. On siting and the operations of the COG, continued operations, the Commercial Aviation Work Group secured in the transportation budget. Air quality mostly playing defense, but I do think it's a really great story to tell because across the, I think, 10 to 15 different appropriations for air quality, we're talking about somewhere in the tune of, $50 to $100 million, whether it's indoor air quality in classrooms or reappropriations for air quality in overburdened communities, direct assistance, things like that. SAF, both a success and kind of a work in progress for this coming year. In total, across the various appropriations, we secured over $10 million to help out with the R&D facility and the SAF accelerator that's operating up in Snohomish County. We were unsuccessful in getting a number of tax incentives passed as part of our omnibus package, but that'll move forward again this coming year. The other place where we made some significant progress there would have been on permitting and siting. We were able to secure some funding in the budget to have Ecology do some of that work for us via a non-project EIS. As we already talked about, noise will continue to be something we'll advocate for in 2026. As I mentioned already, the $1 million that we'd secured in last legislative session swept into the operating budget. Happened a lot across all three budgets this year, but will continue to be something we push for. And then just something to put back in front of y'all that we've talked about before but didn't speak about last time, aviation fuel tax. There's still a substantial amount of money. We're talking $50 million plus that the state collects on the sale of aviation fuel that is currently being placed in the MOTCA account. The FAA has already been very clear with the state that that's an improper use, that it should be put towards quote-unquote airport or aviation purposes, and that needs to happen ongoing. So we'll continue to advocate there. And then just a couple other things here that are kind of miscellaneous. Secured additional money for aerospace workforce development grants, WashDOT's sustainable aviation grants, and then also we anticipate additional legislation next year aimed at SAMP. We saw a bill this year that was focused primarily on environmental justice and on capital construction around the airport. We know for a fact that a different version or an updated version of that legislation will be talked about throughout the summer. We're going to work with those folks directly and see if we can find something to agree on headed into next session. Next slide, please. Before you ask, I kind of split this up. This is our environmental slide. So here we're going to talk about things like conservation, water, etc. The next slide will actually be on energy, all of that jazz, clean fuels. So on conservation, as noted here, even put Quiet Sound there in parentheses, knowing that they'd be presenting today as well. Secured an additional $700,000 that'll go directly to Maritime Blue to continue the state's Quiet Sound program. It's great to see that we're also supporting with our own dollars. We also continue to see significant funds dedicated towards fish habitat restoration, salmon recovery, and programs that benefit Puget Sound generally. In a tough budgetary year, seeing those monies go to that stuff, really important. Not mentioned here, we also supported the Seattle Aquarium and our other partners in helping to establish bull kelp as the official state marine forest, which I know Commissioner Fellman worked on a little bit. I will hand it over to Brooke here to talk about the RAP Act. Just as a reminder, we supported sustainable waste management and different versions of the RAP Act through the last 3 or 4 sessions.
Yeah, quickly, the bill implements what's known as extended producer responsibility, and as John mentioned, the port's been supportive. I believe the bill has been around in different versions for the last 4 sessions, but it finally was able to get over the finish line this session. Essentially, what it does is starts to shift the process of the cost on waste management from the consumers to the people that produce the products. And so they have to set up a producer responsibility organization, and meet certain recycling goals. This will be implemented over several years. One tiny piece that was in a separate bill but was sort of put in at the last second has to do with a bottle deposit system similar to what they have in Oregon. It doesn't specifically implement one, but it does kind of leave the door open to potentially do one in the future should the legislature choose to do that.
And then just a couple other things that are highlighted in your memo as well. We were able to pass legislation moving to annual statewide tracking on GHGs, trailer legislation to a food and organic waste bill that we supported during last legislative session, retained $5 million for the state's industrial symbiosis program, and they also made a number of significant investments in things like 6 PPDQ monitoring, PFAS investigations and monitoring, contaminants of concern monitoring, all of which is kind of a good segue into talking about stormwater. So this year we were unable or unsuccessful in passing the legislation we worked on with the Northwest Seaport Alliance to create kind of a safe harbor from certain appeals under the state's updated industrial stormwater permit. Those conversations will continue. Things essentially fell apart in negotiating with Department of Ecology mid-session. We also saw $100 million swept from MOTCA funding directly into the general fund, similar to what happened with our noise repair and replace. All of the money that goes towards stormwater at the state level is in MOTCA, $100 million moving out of MOTCA to the state's general fund to backfill other places where we had difficulties. On that note as well, EJ and SEPA will continue to be another really important priority throughout the interim and into next session. We worked directly with Rep. Mena and some folks at Front and Centered on the Curb Pollution Act during session, which would have broadly altered the SEPA process to improve environmental justice outcomes at the local government level and on a project-by-project basis. We made substantial progress on the legislation that was before us, all the way into, I think, the opposite chamber even, but things fell apart at the end there. With your, assuming your support, we'll continue to work with Rep. Mena on that, hopefully getting towards something that the port could be supportive of headed into next year. And I'll just close this slide by saying there's also the environmental crimes bill, which I think folks heard about, or at least I shared some traffic on in the middle of session. Long story short, the Attorney General's office is looking to continue that conversation next session. As a reminder, the bill created some additional criminal penalties associated with violations of the Water Pollution Control Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Hazardous Waste Management Act. By the end of session, we were probably trending towards neutral, but I know that it'll be a big flashpoint headed into next session. Next slide. There were a number of stakeholders that were deeply opposed to even the idea of the bill throughout, and noting that they didn't believe it would ever pass. They were never forced to kind of come to the table and talk to the Attorney General's office about some of those concerns. We know for a fact the AG's office will reintroduce the legislation, and so we assume that we'll see that fight continue, or at least in the early part of session.
Just for a point of information, was that a piece of agency request legislation from the AGO? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a quick question on this slide as well. For the stormwater investments being moved into the general fund, was it the same sort of justification that we saw with the sound installation, that they weren't prepared for projects to begin?
Oh no, not you couldn't spend $1 billion of MOTCA money if you tried. I would say this: MOTCA, the Public Works Assistance Account. I'm trying to think of other sources. These are the places that the legislature typically taps whenever there's any kind of a budgetary shortfall. Unfortunately, the Noise Repair and Replace program was, I think, an easy one for them to pick on in that case, because it is another capital program. It's a nice to do, not a need to do as far as they're concerned, which in the state's mind, a need to do is like a federal injunction, basically, and anything short of that, they'll look at rolling the funding back into the general fund.
Got it. Thank you.
I think we've got another question on this slide from Commissioner Feldman.
The governor established in the AG's office this environmental, not crimes program, but a, what's the term? It's
No, there's an environmental crimes division in the AG's office. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, what is he looking for in addition to what that whole division does?
So all of this relates back to a very specific case. I can't remember the name of the company.
Somewhere in Pierce County.
Yeah, it's in Pierce County, rural Pierce County. There was a dam project. Essentially, this company was pouring chemicals directly into a water source.
Turf, right? The rubber of was it the turf?
I'm going to end up fudging the details, but long story short, what they're doing here is they're taking what are existing crimes, they're misdemeanors right now, and they're elevating the penalties mainly. So things are becoming felonies that are currently misdemeanors. They're looking to step up enforcement. What the Attorney General's office would tell you is that they believe that the current federal administration is not going to enforce existing federal clean air, water, et cetera law. And so they would like the additional authority at the state level to make sure that we can fill the gap. Whether that's exactly what the bill said is, I think, up for debate.
So the business community might have had a concern with this.
That's a fair assumption.
Okay, thank
you. Next slide, please. Unless, great.
What was our position on that?
On the environmental crimes bill?
Yes.
We didn't take a formal public position, but we worked directly with the AG's office throughout. Like I said, I think it's fair to say that we were neutral by the time we were coming to a place where we didn't believe the bill would actually even pass. And just a quick shout out, I don't know if she's watching online or anything, but Carly Michaels from the Statewide Ports Association did a phenomenal job working with the ports and also all of the regulated community under that bill as well. So we were well organized.
Right. It seems to me just from a law and justice perspective that the purpose of creating legal standards is that you would deter crime from happening to begin with, right? And so they would be communicating that should this sort of action occur, then there would be a consequence that would be swift, certain, and severe. So this is, I think, one to mark as a priority interest item for the commission.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So moving here to energy, decarbonization, clean fuels, all the fun stuff. I'll move quickly because there's, I think, a lot of successes we could talk about here. On clean fuels, we were supportive of a bill this year that helps to accelerate the existing compliance timelines under the Clean Fuel Standard. Should overall make our CFS market more competitive, make those credits worth more over time. We also saw a couple bills passed related to the CCA. I think the one that's most relevant will help get us prepared for linkage with the California and Quebec carbon markets if and when that happens. Ecology is currently in the process of doing all of that work. On sustainable maritime, I know that y'all recently approved, I think, or fairly recently, our work around the Sustainable Maritime Fuels Work Group that Maritime Blue is leading. We were able to renew that funding this year, so an additional $250,000 for operation of that work group. We are expecting a legislative report from them pretty shortly. I think in November, their first report is due to the legislature. Port electrification and shore power, we were able to preserve the existing money at the state level for shore power that does preserve the $1 million we'll be getting for our shore power project from the state. Unfortunately, with the difficult fiscal outlook, we won't be getting any additional money into that program as of yet, but I think we'll continue to advocate for that along with other folks headed into the future. And last but not least the Seaport Alliance's Shore Power Demonstration Project, we were able to retain all that funding as well. So I think they're getting ready to accept some of those dollars, but the reappropriation we defended. This should probably
Good job.
be called.
Thank you for that.
Hey, shout out to Sean Egan if he's watching too. Probably should have called this part clean trucking rather than medium and heavy duty ZEV incentives, but we were able to preserve money for the drayage demonstration project, ZEV and alternative fuel charging and refueling infrastructure, hydrogen truck refueling, and the $100+ million that we had for point of sale vouchers for medium and heavy duty ZEVs. Green jobs and infrastructure, again, probably a misnomer up there, should be titled something like Program Supporting Clean Energy Infrastructure. $24 million for the green jobs and infrastructure grants, $26 million for the Clean Energy Fund, $47 for the Hard to Decarbonize grants, Clean Energy Community Grants over $10 million, and then some de minimis programming here. FSEC has a new Clean Energy Development Program, Clean Energy Development pre-development grants that we should be able to tap into as well out of FSEC, and then a couple studies that are ongoing. So the offshore wind supply chain study is funded. That's another Maritime Blue one that we were able to help support. And then the battery energy storage system guidance that Ecology will be putting together. BESS, really exciting work going on there, and hopefully will be tapped into.
Okay, is that the end of this page?
I got like one more thing here, and then I'll go next slide.
Okay.
You want to speed up?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
I want us to be able to ask questions on
Gotcha,
this page
sorry.
before
I was
we
like, I can
move
try.
forward.
On clean buildings, I'll just say quickly, we were able to pass legislation aimed at helping regulated entities like the port comply with the state's clean building standards, which we're currently working on coming into compliance on. There's also an additional $13 million for public building energy audit grants. And then some miscellaneous ones before I stop. There's bills passed this year focusing on fusion energy facilities, low carbon thermal energy networks, and also utility joint use agreements. That last one there, I would say broadens and democratizes the ability to enter utility agreements. So theoretically, the port could become a partner with one of the utilities in order to pursue some sort of renewables network or whatever it may be. And I'll
The
stop
port
there.
or the alliance?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm going to look at my colleagues. There was a lot here. Do you have questions on this page specifically? Can you say the part about the hydrogen fueling stations?
Yeah. Transportation budget sets aside $25 million for ZEV and alternative fuel charging, recharging infrastructure, and then an additional, $15 million for specifically hydrogen trucking and hydrogen refueling.
Put it into context for me. What's the news with the hydrogen hub effort?
That's a loaded question. I wouldn't tie them
How is the
directly
legislature
together.
and the governor's office thinking about it?
There's a reappropriation to help support the hydrogen hub, so some state dollars to match some of the federal money that's coming in, but really the budgets
It's a match.
were pretty dry on that. There's not a ton of work happening at the state level to be further supportive of the state's hydrogen hub, but
So what are they investing in with the infrastructure?
there are already a number of hydrogen trucks on the market and that are moving forward. These are refueling stations to help
Including
out
at
with
ports, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this is for, is it along supply chain? Like where are they thinking?
I mean, it's a pretty open-ended grant. It could be theoretically anywhere, but it is the kind of dollars that we and the Seaport Alliance could tap into.
Okay. And then later next month, we have our Central Washington Clean Fuels, Central and Eastern Washington Clean Fuels Tour. Will you be participating in that?
Yes.
There was tremendous value in last year's tour.
Thanks.
No, thank you. Is he still here? Okay, please note for the record, we've been rejoined by Commissioner Calkins virtually. Okay, so that's interesting. And I'll go ahead and pop over to you, Commissioner Calkins, for your questions. I know he has a separate meeting happening right now.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to miss this. I wanted to say thanks, John, for mentioning the money in the offshore wind supply chain study. I also just want to share that this spring I had an opportunity to travel to 3 different offshore wind conferences, a national level one in Virginia Beach, a Pacific Coast one in Sacramento, and then an international one in Korea. And contrary to popular perception, offshore wind is not dead. It's actually quite healthy and moving forward in spite of the headwinds from the Trump administration, and pun intended. And so I'm thrilled to hear the state is still investing in further consideration of what role we might play in supply chain for offshore wind built anywhere, and also just kind of admonishing all of us to not turn a blind eye to this, that there's tons of potential there. It's a technology that delivers renewable clean energy quicker than virtually any other technology, with the exception of land, solar, and land wind. And so as we think about all the ways that we're going to get to renewable by 2050, offshore wind continues to be one of the most viable options. And I continue to think it will be a part of the mix in the future in Washington.
Thank you, Commissioner Calkins, and that actually helped answer my next question about was it an offshore feasibility or readiness study?
So this is the study on the supply chain.
Supply chain readiness or feasibility, same thing.
I think either one's an adequate descriptor.
Okay, and then what's the timeline for that?
I should know this top of my head, but I might have to get back to you on due dates on the actual reporting there. They
Presumably
did get some money that was...
they have to report back to the legislature and the governor by December or next
and
June.
The first tranche of money for that was actually delayed by the initiative, same as our Sustainable Maritime Fuels Work Group. And so they've been working on it, but hadn't received any state money yet, and now they kind of have double at the same time.
Well, knowing that that's in the works, there's going to be a lot of anticipation around us Puget Sound ports around that. Commissioner Calkins has my favorite saying, and that the Port of Everett is already doing a lot of the project cargo around that, and he says we want to drink of their slushy. So like it's a market that we want to be able to tap into. So it's exciting to hear that the legislature's thinking of it that way. Not related to this slide, but on a previous slide, can you talk to me a little bit about WASCA and what the newest is? And
yes,
the bidding
and actually,
process is that?
WASCA will come up specifically, I think, on the next slide after this one, related to our work on transportation.
And then on the last slide, I just wanted to mention that you touched on the airport siting, and that there's been a lot of conversation among us on how we continue to lean into that conversation. But the commission just had its retreat earlier. It was last week time is weird. And we held it in Snohomish County to have a conversation with the Port of Everett to see about the way that they're thinking of it. And they are already thinking of themselves as the next big airport, right? And we have to think about how, in the meantime, while this timeline is working itself out for a siting for another international hub, that we can count on them to accommodate overflow. And that's the release valve that we experience. So shout out to you and everybody who's continuing to put their heads together around what the long-term solution is. In the meantime, we're leading and putting our heads together. And shout out to Commissioner Cho for even exploring a shuttle program between our airport and theirs. And then for the UI for striking workers, who puts the bill for that? Is that part of a Washington State program? Would that be the Port of Seattle?
Well, the way that the bill ended up and the way that it passed is, should there be a strike, and there's some limitations in there, the strike would have to be allowable under federal law. So, for example, a lot of public employees under federal law are not technically allowed to strike, even though that they do. So the employer would foot the bill for a certain amount of time. I believe the benefits go up to 6 weeks. If the strike was to last for a very long time, the effects would be socialized among all employers, and you could potentially see rate increases across the board if there was a really long strike.
And one of the finer points on that bill is that I think it's either ESD or LNI has to do ongoing reporting as to how the implementation of the bill affects the unemployment insurance account and programs at the state level as well.
That makes sense. Even though they're being asked to identify 6 to 7% cuts on top of the 30% that's already happened?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Got it. Okay, Commissioner Fellman?
Thank you. It's a mouthful and you're not even done yet. So appreciate the baud rate. One observation, one question. So what is the role you see FSEC playing here in the mix?
A couple things, I guess. I mean, number one, for large-scale utility solar programming, I mean, FSEC is pretty much where all of those decisions get made. And so they were given some money in this budget to do pre-development, site identification, site readiness, things like that. And I'd have to ask the folks at FSEC exactly how some of those dollars are going to be spent, but I also have to assume a lot of it will be helping some of those projects access whatever federal money or private capital could be available as well, and so helping with the financing side of things.
Great, and we have Kurt Beckett at the helm of that, right?
Correct.
So to the degree we want to work benefits to the ports, we have a very receptive ear there, right? I'm very encouraged by that. The only other thing for right now, though, I definitely want to hear the Waska conversation.
Yeah.
I guess following up on the regional airport discussion, the one study that I would love to see done is nothing to do with Washington State, right? I want to see the study that looks at the various different airports around the country, because this concern is, airport capacity is a concern throughout the country. How these various different states are able to, or airports are able to share their space with the military and with the Air National Guard. And we're told vociferously how it's impossible here. And every time there's a study, we can't even look here. The previous directors of these studies have expressed to us their frustration that they can't even look here. And so rather than looking here, what is the special sauce that exists in all these other places which are meeting growing demand by sharing both airspace and airport space? And so I'm just wondering, do you think part of a new commission that such a question could be asked when it's not looking specifically at a local siting?
I think to your point and to Commissioner Hasegawa's earlier point about the progress at Payne Field and the way that they're now positioning themselves, that does relieve a lot of the pressure on the COG and what they're actually looking at. And so, the simple answer, yes. I think they could very easily look at joint military, commercial service airports, and then really, if they're not forced to absolutely identify a greenfield development, or if they're not forced to find a secondary site that's looking to plus up its current services, then they have the ability to expand exactly what they're studying.
Right. And we also talked about Plainfield potentially taking some of our air cargo so we can handle some of that, which is another way of addressing it. And just for observation, I don't know if you saw, it was like yesterday's newspaper, I think Linda Mapes did the story on how our resident killer whales are using kelp as a loofah. And so the importance of kelp to our recovery of our most endangered and wonderful species, it's only elevating in importance.
I didn't see it, but some good bedtime reading for me. Unless there are more questions, I think, I was going to turn to Brooke, actually. I know transmission and grid modernization was something the commission really wanted us to focus on, or at least be knowledgeable on. Go for it, Brooke.
Sure, I can quickly report. Transmission is a huge focus for the legislature because we can continue to build more power production, but if we can't move it, it's useless. So there was a bill this session that would have created a transmission authority, which essentially is, if BPA is not building, trying to incentivize others to build by having some eminent domain and other tools to bring to the toolbox to help with financing. The bill did not pass. It made it very far, I think, to the last step, but some controversy among some of the SEPA provisions and other stuff. So they ended up putting $300,000 in the budget for Commerce to start this work and look at financing options and look at what an authority could do. There's some good examples of other states that have implemented it well and some that haven't, and so they'll be looking at that over the interim. Those bills will be back next session.
And then just because I know it was a controversy during session, real quick, still here, we had two bills, one that addressed scrubbers and use of high sulfur fuels on ocean-going vessels, and one that was, I would call, a shore power mandate. I'll just say quickly, I mean, both of those died during session. We will continue the conversations with the stakeholders on those throughout this interim. I think we'll land in a really good place. The scrubbers bill is already well on its way. We haven't yet re-engaged with Pacific Environment on what next steps look like on the shore power mandate bill, but that will continue to be a conversation, and I'll come back in front of you with some more details at some point here, near future. Next slide, please.
Could you just elucidate when you say scrubbers are well on the way?
There was conversation already about what the real intent was with the bill and how the overall scope of the bill could be altered. Honestly, Friends of the San Juans and some other folks who kind of started the conversation really want to focus on what use of open loop scrubbers looks like in and around the San Juan Islands. If that's the bill that gets reintroduced next year, I think it's pretty tough for us to say anything about it from the Port of Seattle perspective.
What about WUPA?
I don't know what that means.
The WPPA. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I was like,
I'm sorry.
That's a new one for me. We'll be at the table with the Ports Association as we work on the bill with the Friends of the San Juans and the sponsors on the bill. I don't know yet how they would line up if that's I'm not sure what question you're asking.
What was their position?
They were opposed to the bill
Yeah,
that was
I-
running, and the conversation ended pretty quickly. It was given a hearing in both chambers and died.
They just
pretty
ran the clock.
quickly after that. Not even that. I mean, it was given a complimentary hearing. It didn't feel like it was ready for prime time in a lot of ways, and they wanted to open a conversation.
Sure.
Sure.
Mr. Feldman.
You know, I worked on scrubbers before I came to the commission, so I have some familiarity with the subject. The ability, right now, we don't allow scrubber discharge at the dock at all. So we know that they can either burn low sulfur fuel or run it into their storage tanks. Unless you have an open loop scrubber, you only have the option of burning low sulfur fuel. And I think the entire Carnival fleet is all open loop. And so, you know, I didn't realize the Friends of the San Juans just want to deal with the San Juan Islands. I thought there was a broader community of folks that are looking at it, but it's just, you know, I saw the way this need for clean fuel was sort of being conflated with the dislike of scrubbers. So I can understand why this got confused, but when you're dealing with an open loop system, that is the only alternative. You know, holding and going offshore is only okay if you can hold, right?
To your point, I don't want to put words in other folks' mouths or speak for anyone. That's my understanding of the original intent behind the bill. On to transportation, very quickly here, because I think we're already over time.
No, sorry.
okay.
Question for Aaron, our Chief of Staff. Can you just refresh the Commission's memory on the presentation we just received on the need to harden the grid for future utilization? We just got a briefing on that. He's blinking slowly.
Wheels are falling off here.
Who was that? What
But we're
location?
trying to recall. We
Yeah.
just received a presentation. Oh, it was NWSA. That's why. Yeah. Presumably shore power. Okay. Okay. Sorry. We're just interested in the context of this presentation, so.
Sure.
All right, back to you.
Speaking of transportation, so Brooke already talked a little bit about new revenue. I'll just say about the transportation revenue package quickly, mainly relying on a substantial increase to the gas tax, transfer of sales tax revenue on vehicle sales, and then some other smaller buckets, one of which actually helps out with our SAF efforts. There was a small excise fee created on private aviation that will end up going towards paying for SAF infrastructure in the long run. I would say overall, the conversation around new revenue was a huge success for us because, at the very least, we passed or you adopted a state legislative agenda that adhered to certain priorities, which were we want to benefit freight, multimodal, continue to decarbonize, and we don't want new transportation revenue to disadvantage port industries. I would say we can check all of those boxes pretty successfully. I think it's overall fair to say, too, that a major part of the interim conversation will be focused on additional transportation revenue for roadway preservation, maintenance, and existing major projects. As I noted, kind of in both columns here, both successes and headed into next session, we will continue to talk about new revenue, even though we just passed, I don't know if it's the largest transportation revenue package ever, but it's certainly up there. The main thing that will be talked about through interim will be a road usage charge and agreeing on some form of voluntary road usage charge to start, and then over the next probably 10 years implementing something that will theoretically replace the diminishing gas tax over time. I already talked about decarbonization work. I don't need to rehash that. Very quickly, major projects, investments, gateways fully funded at $902 million. We were able to bridge a significant funding gap that was identified this past interim. Most of that's via new toll revenue, or well, maybe not most, but a large bucket of that is via new toll revenue. We were able to get money in the budget for Revive I-5 mitigation. As a reminder, parts of I-5 will be shut down, both north and southbound, headed into 2026. So there'll be money in the budget to help mitigate the worst of that, I guess. $15 million for SR 18 widening, some other major projects, but I think those are the three highest priority ones that we identified pre-session. P3 and WASCA. So Senator Elias had a bill this past year and the year before to enable public-private partnerships on transportation projects. That bill did not pass, but as part of the broader transportation revenue package, he was able to include most of the language from that bill. So there will be a P3 structure on transportation projects. I think it's a delayed implementation date of, I want to say, either 2026 or 2027. I don't have that on my notes, unfortunately. Either way, regardless of the P3 bill and the provisions in the revenue package, there was also a standalone proviso in the state transportation budget that focused on the WASCA property specifically. Long story short, WashDOT is not able to make any decision one way or the other on development, transfer, et cetera, of WASCA without consulting with the state legislature. So that puts us in a place where I know that Kierlease in real estate is already working directly with some of the folks at WashDOT as to what a feasibility study could look like, where we jointly decide, hopefully, what we could do together on development of the WASCA property in the future and how that would work into our preservation of industrial land strategy. So maybe I'll stop there just to make sure I answered the question.
Commissioner Feldman, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of being with Mr. Elias in Germany, and took a bit of a bus ride with him and sat down and was asking him specifically about that, and how can we kill the my spacing a C40 process, C something, and he said no, C40 goes forward, and that at the same time they don't have to accept any of them, right? It's just like, but he wants to be able to consider that, and said, I said, well, don't you know that if for a private developer to do this, it almost invariably is going to require these higher revenue things like housing? And so you're going to basically generate a project that we're probably going to have to oppose. And I said, well, why can't we talk about, you know, this maritime supportive housing or building? But basically meeting WashDOT's need. We'll give you your office space and let us deal with the rest. You know, just give us the property and we can potentially just take care of the rest. And he says, well, if you want to be considered, you have to like put forward a project through the C-40 process. And from what I'm hearing, we think we have just a direct relationship with WashDOT, whereas he wants to, and I knew, I kind of guessed this, was that he wants to see some sort of, you know, iconic type building that is, you know, where C-40 would incentivize something like that. And I go, we can build a CLT, you know, office building or whatever, and we can do fancy landscaping, but from what I understand, he wants that process, and then he says, put something out there, and we'll consider it. At the same time, we don't have to accept any of it. So I'm just wondering, it just doesn't jive to me with this, you know, talking to Steve and others that, you know, we just have like kind of first right of refusal, and we can just jump the gun.
I wouldn't say we have first right of refusal. I would say Senator Leas has a very clear perspective, and just to add to what you even said here, I mean, he's also said that housing is not something he's even opposed to on that property, whether it's something that's cool and innovative, right? But Representative Fye is in a very different place, and obviously the negotiations between the two of them will factor into anything we're able to hash out with WashDOT as well.
Well, that actually spurs my memory of, if you can go back to the last slide for me, please. At our commission retreat, we received a presentation by Greater Seattle Partners. And they had mentioned for us that we need to quadruple our power supply by 2050 in order to meet the future need for an activated SODO to service a clean energy future, which is all a part of the Teal New Deal and the vision for an activated SODO for clean fuels and in supporting the maritime industry. And that's a formal partnership that we have with them and the Seattle's Office of OED. And so this is one of those situations where I feel like a sense of urgency to be able to advise leadership like Senator Leas that there is a critical and strategic future use for every square foot of the working waterfront for maritime and clean energy purposes. So thank you, Commissioner Fellman, and thank you to you guys for continuing to have those conversations. And thank you also to Brooke for the progress that you've made to support hardening the grid, including, I'm assuming that would include also for Seattle's working waterfront. Okay, moving forward to the next slide. Yes, sir.
So, you know, our waterfront plan already shows that we're over allocated. I mean, so like, just from what we know in our immediate region. So, you know, I think independent of any further expansion of SODO, everybody wants to plug in and I think there is juice. It just, the last mile is really where we run into the bottleneck. So that problem exists. And as far as like I think our ability to have credibility that we want to convert SODO into this, you know, high-tech manufacturing district, we have to take WASCA on. It's like, if we're not prepared to invest in that at our doorstep, and all we want to do is tell people what they can't do, I just don't think we have the cred. So I'm really hoping that we can put together a project with our compatriots and make something real.
Knowing that we're way over time here, I think I'll go next slide, and then I'll maybe cherry pick this one a little bit. So just real quick on some of our economic development, workforce, and labor priorities this session, able to continue significant investments and also pass a couple bills related to Career Connect learning, experiential learning, increasing the number of especially K-12 students that are headed into CTE programs over time. We were able to get a bill passed on apprenticeship requirements, responsible bidder criteria that I think will do some great work to both increase apprenticeship utilization, also without disadvantaging, especially some of our WIMBY vendors. Passed several bills related to equitable working conditions. I think it was the state's largest expansion of PFML in recent memory, which is obviously really great to see. A couple bills that passed on childcare, one specifically related to childcare siting and the ability, or the requirement, I should say, for cities and towns to move forward with siting of childcare facilities with some reasonable exceptions. And then kind of jumping to the bottom here, works in progress. They were able to pass a tourism bill this year. It isn't everything that we hoped it would be. That bill started out as something that would pass or create, I should say, a self-assessment on the industry and create the possibility of creating tourism improvement districts. It basically became a study over time, so we'll continue to pay attention to that, engage in that work, and hopefully support those priorities in 2026 as the group agrees on them. And then supports for business and trade. I'll turn to Brooke here in a second, but I guess I'll just start by saying it's the most significant number of cuts to the state's economic development programming since I think like 2014, which was around the same time we were still dealing with some of the post-2008 and economic recession factors.
Yeah, I can just add that there were several things, like including the Department of Commerce's sector lead program that saw significant cuts. I think folks are still trying to understand what this really means. There's a new director at the Department of Commerce, obviously coming from the state legislature, I think had seen that there's a lot of things that go to commerce and then maybe they don't end up getting the money out the door. So I'm not sure if they're going through their own process of sort of just reevaluating it all and seeing what works. But there were significant cuts to like sector lead program. There was a big cut to tourism, the micro enterprise, like all of these different things that exist in that department to help small businesses. So I think there's an opportunity to see what is the path forward, along with several other of our partners that are also working in this space to see what Commerce has planned and what they're going to do. But this session, there was a lot of funding cut.
Next slide, please.
And that included Core Plus as well. They completely
That's
got
correct,
zeroed
yeah.
out, whereas the last session called them a model program.
Specifically Core Plus Maritime, yes.
So, but like the fact that this is all small business economic development stuff, it seems to me that we could tie a bow around this whole package of concern, and this is like what we're about, right? So we should be maybe making some sort of letter to the legislature or Commerce here. We're here to help, but
yeah.
I kind of think that everybody's got an oar in this water.
I'd say it's fair to say we're already talking to members of the legislature that care, especially about traditional economic development programming, and especially staff level members at Commerce about what they want to pursue in 26. It'll be a matter of figuring out exactly what Director Wynn wants to do, and obviously we would not want to introduce or try to support a package of things that he wouldn't be supportive from the agency standpoint. Next slide, please. Yeah, right. Last slide here, just a couple victories. Civil asset forfeiture, small port of that overall bill, but in the end, we're able to get a large bill passed that has a specific section that allows POSPD to expand their authority, or expands the authority for POSPD to use net proceeds of forfeiture proceedings to provide substance abuse education, work on human trafficking, and to reinforce responsible gun ownership. We also saw, after several sessions in which we supported it, the TOD bill passed, transit-oriented development, another kind of end-around strategy to help protect industrial lands by forcing residential development into places where it should exist rather than kind of anywhere. And two other things that will be perennial issues for us: tax increment financing and right-sizing the state's TIF program. And then automated enforcement authority that deals mainly with the airport expressway and where we're seeing lots of folks parking up on the shoulder, our partnership with WashDOT and how we kind of move forward there. Next slide, please. I think is our last one, really, just as a reminder to you about how the process plays out from here. I'll be looking for time with each of you or with 221s to talk about what we missed, what we didn't talk about here that you think may have happened during session, and to start to build our 2026 agenda. Obviously, we'll continue dialogue with legislators around that as well at the state level, state agencies, and all those folks and stakeholders, and then hopefully come back before you sometime in October, November for our 2026 legislative session.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, you are free to go.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. All right, so that brings us to the bottom of our business meeting agenda. Are there any closing comments at this time or motions referring to committee? Well, I guess for my part, I do just want to reiterate happy Pride to everybody, to our broader port community. Happy Juneteenth to everyone as well. I just want to acknowledge that it's been an incredibly painful and difficult time for so many people, including most recently with the launch of an assault on Iran and the ongoing uncertainty that this brings to all of us. We have been receiving inquiries about what all of this might mean as it dovetails with the tariffs, the international trade war, gas prices. It's just too early to tell what the impact will be on our own trade and commerce, but it's something that we are watching, committed to communicating with the public about, and we are receiving inquiries and responding to the media on this as well. Thank you to everybody for your support for this public meeting. Seeing no further comments from my colleagues, the time is 2:48 and we are adjourned.